Welcome to ELA Experience, where today we're talking about plot structure and conflict. Our essential questions are, what is plot structure and how does conflict create plot structure? Structure simply refers to how a literary work is put together. Think of it as the blueprint for a text, and it has five basic sections. Exposition is where we are introduced to the characters, the setting, and the conflict. Here at this point, at the end of the exposition, is what we call the inciting event. This is the point at which the conflict, the problem that the protagonist faces, begins to set the action of the plot into play. As the conflict worsens, we call this section the rising action until we reach the climax where the conflict cannot get any worse and it begins to turn towards resolution. This section is called falling action, where all of the aspects of the conflict begin to be tied up and they move toward the place where the conflict is resolved, and we call that resolution. Think of plot structure like a roller coaster. We get on the car here at exposition, and we're getting to know the people who are riding the roller coaster with us. We are getting to know the setting of the roller coaster, and we also begin to feel the motor that's going to move the roller coaster set in motion, and that would be the conflict. As we move up the roller coaster, that motor has to work a little bit harder. That conflict worsens with each plot event until finally we reach the top of the hill. This is where the conflict is at its highest point. It can't get any worse than this. We can't go any higher on that roller coaster. And then we're over the hill and we're beginning to move towards resolution. And that is where we're coming through falling action. The energy is lessening, even though we might be moving faster. And finally, we come to a stop where the conflict is resolved. They're actually, although these are the steps in a traditional plot structure, not all authors will tell a story in this order. Some of them will start at point A and go to point B and tell in a sequential or a chronological order. But you'll also see works that begin maybe at the end, and through flashbacks the story is told so that we end up at the end of the story as well, and so we have a circular narrative. You have a special type of plot structure called frame narrative, and that is a story within a story told through the use of flashbacks. An author might tell a sequential story, but within that story, they might use flashbacks to go forward, to go backward in the narrative, and then to move forward towards the end. So, for our standard, we're going to analyze plot structure, and to analyze plot structure after reading, we want to follow 5 steps. Number 1, we want to think about, where does the conflict begin? Where is that problem first set up? We want to identify the climax. Where's the point at which the conflict can't get any worse? And we want to identify the resolution. Where are all of the loose ends of that conflict tied up and resolved? Then what we want to do is we want to fill in the events between the exposition and the climax, and between the climax and the resolution. At that point, we can think about how the story is told, how the story is structured. Remember, these are the 5 basic parts of plot structure: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. And if we can identify those pieces, then we can also look at stories that are told using those pieces, but in a non-traditional format. Thanks for tuning in today, and join me tomorrow when we're talking about character dialogue and how it works in a story.